Some silences weigh more than screams, and some betrayals, though never spoken aloud, rot you from the inside out like fruit left out in the sun. I was that fruit, ripe on the outside, broken within. For more than 20 years, I lived under the same roof as the love of my life and his lover. It wasn't just any woman, it was my sister. The same sister I shared a crib with, childhood secrets, laughter on rainy nights, the one who promised she'd always stand by me. And she did, but not in the way I imagined. If this story already touches something in you, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps me keep sharing stories like this. Where are you listening from? My name is Yolanda Ray Matthews. I'm 74 years old, and I'm that soft-spoken lady everyone greets at the bank line or when I'm watering my porch plants. Widowed for over a decade now, mother of 2, grandmother of 5. People see me as gentle, one of those women who offers you banana bread and a warm word. But no one knows the story buried beneath my fingernails and behind my clenched teeth. No one knows what I endured to hold together a family that, in truth, never really existed. I've decided to share this story now because I'm tired of pretending I healed without scars. Every time my grandkids tell me I'm strong, I feel the tears well up. I wasn't strong. I was compliant. And that cost me the life I could have had. Maybe, if I tell this the way I'd tell a friend over coffee, someone out there will understand that not everything that looks like love is love. Sometimes, the worst prisons come with flowered curtains and breakfast on the table. Speaking after so many years isn't easy, but there's a voice inside me that no longer accepts silence as punishment. I'm tired of smiling with my mouth while my body shakes through the night. I'm tired of excusing what should never have been accepted. They told me silence was noble, that endurance was virtue. But now I know silence made me complicit in my own suffering. And endurance? That was just a slow death, one day at a time. So here I am, not as a victim, but as a witness to what I lived, to what I allowed, and to what I finally broke free from. Some stories hurt, yes, but they can also heal. And if my pain can keep another woman from betraying herself the way I once did, then telling it is worth it. If you'll let me, I'll take you back to where it all began. Before my world shattered into pieces, my childhood unfolded in a small rural town in North Carolina, the kind where time still moved with the rhythm of the seasons, and everyone knew your name, and your grandmother's too. Our house was a modest white clapboard with green shutters, a wooden porch that creaked under every step, and a garden my mama tended like a sacred ritual. Every morning, sunlight poured through the lace curtains she washed by hand, and the scent of biscuits and bacon filled the kitchen before the rooster even crowed. My daddy, a quiet man, with worn hands, would already be out in the fields by then, and Mama would wake us girls up singing old hymns, her voice soft like a worn-out lullaby. There were 3 of us. I was the oldest, the responsible one who always kept an eye on the grits while Mama ran out to feed the chickens. Then came Lucille, Lucy as everyone called her, the middle child with hair like gold corn silk and eyes so green they looked painted on. She had a smile that could calm any storm. And then there was baby Mary, still in diapers when these memories took shape. We shared one room, 3 narrow beds, wool blankets that scratched a little but kept us warm, and secrets whispered under the covers on stormy nights. Lucy was my best friend, my twin in soul if not in birth. When the thunder rolled, we curled up together like kittens, waiting for Mama's calm hand. Mama was the heartbeat of that house. She worked harder than anyone I've ever known, always with a soft touch and a steady voice. Her love showed up in small ways. A new ribbon tied in our braids, a hot sweet potato on a cold afternoon, a kiss pressed to our foreheads while we pretended to sleep. Daddy didn't say much, but he taught us to keep our word, respect the land, and never lie. I remember once, I broke one of Mama's canning jars and tried to hide the pieces. Daddy found out. He didn't whip me. He sat me down and told me the truth carries weight, but lies carry edges that cut deeper. Life was simple. We walked to school on a dirt road. That turned to mud when it rained. We wore hand-me-down dresses and polished our Sunday shoes with bacon grease. Teachers were strict, but they cared. After school, Lucy and I would chase fireflies, swing from the tree out back, or play hide and seek until the fireflies took over the yard. We didn't have much, not a television, not even a radio some years. But we had stories, hot cornbread, and a love that felt endless. Sundays were sacred. Mama dressed us in our best clothes, starched and clean, and we walked together to the small Baptist church at the end of the road. After service, we'd sit on the church steps sipping sweet tea while the grown-ups gossiped and the boys played tag. Lucy always got compliments. How pretty she was, how tall she was getting. And I beamed. I never felt jealous. I was proud, like I was the one who helped make her shine. I used to dream we'd raise our families side by side, houses right next to each other, sharing recipes and afternoons on the porch. Winters were tough. The house was drafty, and we slept in socks and hats, but we never really felt the cold. Love warmed that house. We split everything, our food, our chores, our dreams. When the wind howled outside, we curled up with hot tea and stories about how Mama met Daddy, about angels and miracles. The whole house smelled like cinnamon, wood smoke, and safety. We didn't know we were poor, because really, we weren't. My childhood didn't have frills, but it had beauty, beauty in the way. Mama's fingers moved over fabric as she quilted at night, in the hum of bees around the honeysuckle, in the shared orange between three girls in a hammock. Ours was a home stitched together with gentleness. Yes, we had hard days, and yes, sometimes money ran out before the month did, but we had each other. Lucy and I made a promise one night under a blanket fort. We'd never let anything come between us, and back then, I believed that with my whole heart. Every year, our town held a 4th of July, fair that felt like magic. Booths with pie contests, lemonade stands, a tiny Ferris wheel that squeaked when it turned. Mama made apple pies, and Lucy danced barefoot in the grass. I remember watching her spin, red ribbons in her hair, thinking she was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, and I was okay being in the background. She was the sunlight. I was the shadow that kept her cool. Behind the house, we had a pecan tree older than anyone alive in town. It was our fortress, our stage, our secret meeting place. Lucy and I carved our names in its bark and buried a time capsule beneath its roots, a ribbon, a marble, and a note that read, "Forever Sisters." I remember her face that day, dirt on her cheeks, fire in her eyes. If anyone had told me then that someday she'd break that promise, I'd have laughed. Back then, Lucy was everything to me, and I would have given her anything, everything. On Sunday afternoons, Daddy would read the paper on the porch while Mama crocheted in her chair. Lucy played her harmonica soft and slow, and I'd close my eyes and wish time could freeze. We were happy. I know we were, because we weren't afraid to be. We didn't yet know the kind of darkness the world could hold. If someone had warned me, I wouldn't have believed them. Back then, we thought love lasted forever, and blood meant loyalty. The first shift came quiet, like fall slipping in through the screen door. Mama, who was always the center of our world, started moving slower. At first, we thought it was just the summer heat or the weight of too many chores. But one morning, she couldn't get out of bed. Her hands, once steady and sure, trembled when she tried to pour coffee. Daddy took her to the doctor 2 towns over, and when they came back, he wouldn't look us in the eye. Her heart's just tired, he said, but even at 13, I knew it was more than that. Something inside her was dimming. Lucy and I took over the house without being asked. I did the cooking, she did the cleaning, and we both watched over baby Mary like hawks. Daddy worked harder, stayed out longer. I quit school that fall. Nobody said it out loud, but we all knew I had to. That's how it was back then. The oldest daughter picks up where the mother left off. I tried to carry it all, but every night I'd sneak to Mama's room and lie beside her, pretending everything would go back to how it was. Then one morning, she was gone, just like that. Her face calm, her hands folded like she was already praying. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Something in me locked up. Daddy stood at the foot of her bed like a stranger, and Lucy collapsed on the porch, her sobs shaking the screen door. We buried Mama on a cloudy Tuesday. The preacher said she was at peace, but peace felt like a word that didn't belong to our house anymore. Everything changed after that. Daddy stopped talking. Mary was sent to live with an aunt in Tennessee. Just for a while, they said. Lucy and I were left alone with him in a house that no longer felt like ours. The curtains Mama had loved hung heavy with dust. The kitchen, once full of warmth, echoed now. We tried to keep it together, to keep Mama's routines alive, but the love that held us was gone. And in that vacuum, something darker began to grow. Daddy started depending on Lucy more than made sense. She cooked for him, washed his clothes, handled his errands. I told myself he was just grieving, that he needed help. But sometimes I caught him watching her too long, his gaze heavy in a way that made my skin crawl. I brushed it off. I didn't want to see what I feared. Denial is its own kind of comfort, especially when the truth would split your world in half. The house began to shrink around us. Lucy, once so lively, grew quiet. She'd flinch when he entered a room. I noticed how she started wearing long sleeves, even in the heat. Her laughter, once effortless, disappeared like smoke in the wind. I wanted to ask her, to shake her, to scream. But the fear that had started wrapping itself around the walls was already inside me, too. And what if I was wrong? What if saying it out loud made it real? I remember lying awake one night, the floor creaking beneath Daddy's steps. He passed by my room, slow, careful. I held my breath. A door opened down the hall. A pause. Then it closed. I stared at the ceiling until morning, the truth like a stone pressing on my chest. I still wasn't ready to name it, but I knew. Deep down, I already knew. And once you know, something like that, it never leaves you. When Daddy told me it was time to find work in town, I took it as a sign he trusted me. I had just turned 16. The thought of leaving Lucy and the house scared me, but he said we needed the money. Ain't no future here, he muttered one morning while tying his boots. So I packed a small suitcase, 2 dresses, a pair of shoes, and Mama's Bible, and caught the bus to Asheville. I believed I was helping hold the family together. I didn't know I was being pushed out of the way. In Asheville, I found work as a housekeeper for a retired teacher, and then as a server at a local diner. It was hard, but it was honest. I lived in a boarding house with a creaky floor and a kind landlady who let me pay late when I had to. Every spare penny I earned, I sent home. I wrote Lucy letters every week, pages and pages about the city lights, the smell of fresh coffee at sunrise, how I missed her. At first she wrote back with the same warmth, but after a while, her letters got shorter, fewer details, no more drawings in the margins. Then one day, they stopped altogether. I told myself she was just busy. I tried not to worry. But worry has a way of growing in the dark. When I finally came home for a visit a year later, the difference hit me like a punch to the chest. Lucy met me at the door, thin and pale, her eyes skittish like a deer in a trap. Daddy hugged me like nothing had changed. The house was spotless, but it didn't feel clean. There was a coldness in the walls, in the air, in Lucy's silence. I asked her if everything was okay. She smiled, small and stiff, and said, "Of course." That night I woke up thirsty. I crept down the hallway toward the kitchen and froze. Daddy was slipping out of Lucy's room. He didn't see me. I ducked into the shadows. My breath caught somewhere between my ribs. He walked to his room like nothing happened. I stood there a long time, my heart breaking in slow motion. In the morning, I said nothing. Neither did Lucy. But the truth sat between us at breakfast, heavy and undeniable. Back in Asheville, I couldn't sleep. I replayed that moment over and over. I stopped writing. I saved every penny. I tried to call Lucy once through the neighbor's phone, but she wasn't allowed to talk long. "Everything's fine," she said quickly, then hung up. The more I tried to reach her, the more I felt like she was slipping underwater and I couldn't dive in fast enough. The silence from home became a kind of noise in my head, loud, constant, unbearable. 2 years later, I returned home for good. Daddy said the money wasn't needed anymore. Lucy's got it all under control, he said, smiling. She barely looked me in the eye when I arrived. Her spirit was almost gone, like someone had scooped it out and left her body behind. I started watching everything. His movements, her reactions, the patterns. He ruled the house like a king, generous in front of others, cruel in silence. People in town praised him. Such a strong father, raising 2 girls on his own. I wanted to scream. He monitored our every move. We had to ask before stepping outside. He listened to phone calls, timed our outings. Any trace of who we used to be was erased. Lucy wore long sleeves in summer. She jumped at sudden sounds. Sometimes I caught her staring at nothing, her face blank, her fingers shaking. She stopped singing, stopped humming, stopped being Lucy. I tried to protect her, standing between them whenever I could. But he was clever, never left a bruise anyone could see, never raised his voice in public. His control wasn't loud. It was a slow, steady suffocation. One night I found Lucy curled up in the kitchen, crying so hard her breath came in hiccups. I knelt beside her and she whispered, "Don't say anything, please." That broke something in me. I began to keep watch, learning his moods, noting the shifts in his tone, the way he touched her shoulder for too long, the way he locked his door at night. I slept, with my shoes on just in case. I hid a kitchen knife under my mattress, not to use, just to feel like I had something. He began making comments about me, about my clothes, my figure. "You're growing into a woman," he said once, his eyes lingering too long. My skin crawled. I stopped wearing dresses. I shrank myself, made my voice small. I thought maybe if I became invisible, he'd forget I was there. But he didn't. He knew, and I could feel his gaze crawling up my spine like a spider every time I turned my back. At night, I'd lie awake listening for him, mapping out the house in my mind like a battlefield. Lucy and I started locking our door. I'd wedge a chair under the knob, stay up for hours, just watching shadows move across the walls. Sleep felt like a luxury we couldn't afford. Safety was a lie we told ourselves to make it to the next morning. The days that followed felt like moving through fog, thick, quiet, impossible to escape. I learned how to live without making noise, how to step lightly on the wooden floors that creaked with memory. Every day was a performance, every meal cooked, and Smile offered a small act of survival. Daddy seemed pleased with the quiet, as if silence meant peace. But inside, it was a storm. Lucy and I were both sinking, slowly, carefully, holding our breath so he wouldn't notice the struggle. I became invisible on purpose. I timed every step, memorized his routines. I knew when he napped, when he drank too much, when to avoid eye contact. I wore baggy clothes, pulled my hair into tight buns, never wore lipstick, not because I believed it would protect me, just to give myself the illusion that I was untouchable. I tucked a small pocket knife inside my apron every day. I never intended to use it. It just made me feel less helpless. Lucy had changed. She no longer laughed. She barely ate. Her body was thin, frail, like the wind could blow her away. Some mornings, I'd find her in the bathroom, throwing up quietly, wiping her mouth before anyone could see. Her arms were covered in bruises, though she always found excuses for them. I bumped into the door. I slipped. Lies so practiced they sounded like truths. I never questioned her out loud. We both knew, but the knowing hurt too much. One day I saw a purple mark on her neck. She wore a turtleneck in the heat of July. My stomach twisted. I asked nothing. She offered nothing. But that night I cried for the first time in years. I sobbed into a towel in the dark so no one would hear me. The pain was sharp, unbearable, and worse still, it was quiet. That's the kind of pain you never get to run from. Daddy was everywhere. His presence, his voice, his expectations. He dictated what we wore, how we sat, when we could speak. He called us his girls, said it with pride like a badge of honor. The neighbors thought he was a saint. Raising 2 daughters on his own? What a man! I wanted to throw something every time I heard it. They didn't know the man behind the door, the man who smiled too wide, the man who watched us with eyes that burned. To cope, I built rituals. I lit a candle every night, just like Mama used to. I whispered the Lord's Prayer, even though I wasn't sure I believed anymore. I put chairs in front of our door and memorized the creaks in the hallway. At first it was desperation. Then it became routine. Safety lived in the little things, like folding laundry just right, making sure knives were always clean and out of sight, staying 1 step ahead of his moods. My body started speaking for me. I had migraines that split my skull, stomach aches that came without warning. My period stopped. The doctor said it was stress. He had no idea. Every time I slept, I dreamt of running, of screaming, of holding Lucy's hand while we jumped into a river and let the current take us far away. I woke up in sweat, clutching the sheets like they were a lifeline. I began keeping a notebook hidden inside my mattress. Not a diary, just pages of what I couldn't say. I wrote about the smells, the footsteps, the way Lucy would flinch when Daddy opened a door. I wrote about wanting to disappear. Sometimes Lucy would find the pages and leave a small note in return, just a heart or the word same. It was our language, the only way we knew how to stay sane. We stopped dreaming. Dreams felt dangerous, but we still had each other. We were no longer sisters who laughed and danced barefoot. We were soldiers, surviving 1 hour at a time. Our love changed shape. It became protection, became shielding glances and warnings in silence. I didn't tell her, but I watched him like a hawk. I memorized every twitch of his face, every slur in his voice, not because I wanted to fight, because I needed to know when to run. The neighbors praised him, called him noble, a pillar of strength. I hated them for it. Their ignorance was a luxury we couldn't afford. Every time someone complimented him, it felt like a slap. But I nodded, smiled, played my part, because speaking the truth was more dangerous than silence. And that was the hardest part, knowing the world would believe him. That even if we screamed, no one would hear us. So we adapted, like animals do in the wild. We listened for danger. We moved slow. We learned his rhythms better than we knew our own. Lucy and I developed a 6th sense, the ability to feel a shift in the air before anything happened. Every quiet night was a small victory. Every uneventful dinner a relief. We clung to anything soft, anything that didn't hurt. Shared bread, a warm bath, a new bar of soap. These became sacred. Sometimes I wondered if Mama had known, if she ever saw it in him, if maybe she left us because she couldn't stop it, or worse, because she didn't know how. That thought haunted me. But I also imagined her watching us, guiding us. When the house creaked, I liked to think it was her spirit walking with us, reminding us that we weren't completely alone. We did what we had to. We kept our heads down. We waited. We learned that survival isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the silence that saves you, the ability to endure. But in that silence, I promised myself something. One day this would end. One day we would breathe without fear. Not yet, but one day. The first time I allowed myself to imagine escape was during something as ordinary as hanging laundry. The sun was beating down. The cotton sheets smelled of soap. And for a moment, everything felt still. I remember holding a pillowcase up to the clothesline and hearing Mama's voice in my head. Even the most fragile flower knows how to lean toward the light. I froze. My hands trembled not from fear, but from something else. Hope. And right then, I knew. If Lucy and I were ever going to survive, we had to find that light. No one was coming to save us. We had to do it ourselves. I began leaving small notes for Lucy, written on scraps of paper tucked inside her book or under her plate. Phrases like, "I see you. Remember who we are." At first she didn't respond. But then one morning I found one back. Me too. That was the spark. We created a silent language. 3 knocks on the wall meant trouble. A humming tune meant the coast was clear. It felt like we were reclaiming a piece of our bond, thread by thread. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were watching, planning. One afternoon at the market, I ran into Mrs. Ellison, an older woman who used to quilt with Mama at church. She took one look at me and frowned. "You've got your mama's eyes, but your smile looks tired," she said gently. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. She started leaving small bags of fruit on our porch, sometimes warm bread wrapped in cloth. She never asked questions, but I knew. Somehow she saw through it. It didn't change our reality, but it made me feel less alone. I also began paying attention to Daddy closer than ever. I studied his routines, what time he drank, when he left the house, when he seemed weakest. I kept a mental journal of every detail, building a map in my mind. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted a way out. I needed to know how to move in silence, how to protect Lucy without getting us both hurt. I learned when to smile, when to be invisible, when to pretend I didn't hear the things that broke me. Lucy was still quiet, but something had changed. She started brushing her hair again, putting a little Vaseline on her lips. It wasn't much, but it was a sign. She was still in there, somewhere. One morning, while we cleaned the pantry, she grabbed my hand and whispered, "I don't want to die here, Yolanda." My breath caught. That was the first time she admitted it aloud. I didn't cry. I just squeezed her hand and nodded. That moment was our promise. We would get out, somehow. One night, while Daddy snored in his recliner after too much whiskey, Lucy asked me to cut her hair. Her long golden waves had always been her pride, just like Mama's. But she said, "I don't want him recognizing me anymore." I took the scissors with shaking hands and began snipping. Each lock that fell to the floor felt like we were cutting off the weight of what he'd done to her. We buried the hair in the garden. It felt like a ritual, a rebirth. I started hiding coins in the heel of my boot and sewing bills into the hem of my apron. Every bit of extra change I found, I saved. It wasn't much, but it was something. I didn't know what it would buy yet. Maybe a bus ticket, maybe a single night in a motel. But just having that stash hidden gave me power. It reminded me we weren't completely trapped, that maybe someday soon we'd run. One evening, Mrs. Ellison slipped me a folded note wrapped inside a brown paper bag. It simply read, "When you're ready, call this number." There was no name, just digits scrawled in pencil. I memorized it, burned the paper in the fireplace, and told no one. I wasn't ready yet. But that number became my lifeline, a secret thread pulling me forward. It was a Wednesday, just like any other. The kind of day that slips by unnoticed, heavy with routine. Daddy had left early that morning, and Lucy and I spent the day washing windows and cleaning out the shed. The air was thick, the sky gray. Everything felt off. Not loud, not obvious, just slightly tilted. That evening, as we set the table for dinner, I watched Lucy's hands shake. I wanted to say something, to tell her to pack her things and run, but I didn't know where we'd go. And fear, by then, had wrapped itself around every word we hadn't said. That night, Daddy came home drunker than usual. His boots hit the floor hard, his belt clinking with each step. Lucy froze beside the sink, still holding a wet dish. I stepped in quickly, asked him about the crop rotation, the weather, anything to keep him out of her orbit. He barely looked at me. His eyes were locked on her. He pushed past me, toward the back hallway, toward her room. My heart slammed against my ribs. I followed without thinking. He opened her door without knocking like he always did. But this time she screamed. Not a scream of surprise, a scream from the gut, raw and filled with something I hadn't heard from her in years. Defiance. I ran into the room, saw him standing there furious, his shirt half unbuttoned, breathing heavy. I stood between them, my hands out, my legs shaking. "Enough," I said, my voice lower than I thought it could go. He laughed, short, bitter, called me ungrateful, told me everything we had was because of him. I didn't flinch. "I know what you've done," I said. "I've always known." That stopped him. His mouth opened like he wanted to deny it, but the words never came. Maybe because he saw it in my face, the truth, the rage, the end of his power. I told him if he ever touched her again, I'd scream it from the church steps. painted on every wall in town. They might not believe me now, I said, but someone will, and I won't stop until they do. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched, but for the first time, he looked scared. Not because I was strong, but because I had nothing left to lose. He left the room without a word, slammed his bedroom door so hard the picture frames rattled. Lucy and I locked our door and pushed the dresser in front of it. We didn't speak, we packed. Whatever we could carry, money I'd hidden, clothes, a picture of Mama. We didn't cry. We didn't say goodbye to the house. At dawn we left through the back, shoes soaked with dew, hands clasped tight. We walked until our feet blistered, then caught a bus headed west. No plan, no destination, just gone. Every mile that passed was a mile between us and him, between us and silence. Lucy leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "What now?" I didn't have an answer, but I said what I knew. Now we live. The first night in Nashville, we shared a motel bed with scratchy sheets and a broken lamp. It wasn't much, but the door locked from the inside, and that was enough. We slept in our clothes, arms, wrapped around each other like we were still children hiding from a storm. In the morning, I bought us coffee with change from my apron hem. It tasted burnt, but it was freedom. No more creaking footsteps, no more held breath, just silence. And for once, it didn't feel like fear. It felt like peace. We found a room to rent in a boarding house run by a widow named June. She didn't ask questions, just gave us clean sheets and a place to start over. I found work bussing tables, then baking biscuits, in a diner downtown. Lucy got a job at a dry cleaner, pressing shirts and learning to sew again. We didn't talk about the past, not yet, but every night we came home, we shared dinner on the floor and laughed at nothing. Slowly our bodies began to loosen. Our voices found volume. We began to unlearn fear. Daddy died 8 years later, alone according to the neighbor who called. No funeral, no one to claim him. When the news came, we didn't celebrate. We didn't cry either. We just sat in silence, then opened the windows wide, let the air in. It was the first time in years we felt like we could truly breathe. That night, I watched Lucy sleep peacefully for the first time since we were children. That was enough. Now I sit on this porch with my hands folded over my lap, watching the sun warm the flowers I planted with my granddaughter. I don't tell her everything, not yet, but I look at her, and I know I broke the cycle. I chose to live, not just survive, but live. And Lucy, she still sews. She has a little shop now, with her name in gold letters. People come from all over for her quilts. And sometimes when I walk by and hear her humming, I feel like we made it home. If this story touched something in you, please like, subscribe, and share it. It helps me keep telling stories like this. And I'd love to know, how did this story make you feel? Tell me in the comments. I'll be reading.